Hello, and welcome to another edition of Coffee Talk with immigration attorney Brian D. Lerner. In this particular episode, I'd like to talk about some issues that consistently come up with E-1 and E-2 visa petitions. Now, there's lots of videos I've done in the past that touch on different aspects of the E1s and E2s, but in this particular video, I'd like to touch on little highlights and things you need to be aware of in order to make a more successful application for the E1 and E2. So let me just go through it. So for example, Iran, if you happen to be from Iran, has an E-1 treaty, but it's pretty useless since there's trade restrictions with Iran. So, just for your info, um, if the money for the transfer of money that's going to come in the U.S. is going to come from banks that have U.S. sanctions on them, then it won't be obviously available. And right now, at least in Russia, there are two banks that have U.S. sanctions. So just make sure, even if you're not a Russian citizen, of course, wherever you happen to be transferring the money, that those banks don't have sanctions against them. Now, make sure that the E1 and or E2 is at least 50% owned by the treaty country, with the idea that it's better to have 51% because there'll always be an issue with control and management. And if the treaty country owns 51%, it does make those items easier to prove. Now, if there's going to be mergers and acquisitions, then it becomes necessary to determine after the merger or after the acquisition if the requisite 50% of the treaty country still exists. Because what if it merges with some company from China and now their 50% has been diluted to 42%? If that's the case, then the E2 or E1 won't work. Now, the employees coming over, you can get an E2 specialized employee, but they don't actually have to invest anything. But even though you still have to have a main E2 investor. So if you have the main E2 investor and several different employees that have some kind of specialized knowledge, you can bring them over on E2s without them having to invest a single penny. Now, many times someone in the US here will switch from some other status to E2, like, F1 student to E2, and then they'll want their spouse and children to come over and go to the consulate to get the visas. Well, generally speaking, you can't do a change of status here and have the derivatives get a visa over there. You're going to have to go over to the consulate or embassy in order to get the visa. Now, E2s are generally always given for 2 years in the US, even if the visa itself was issued for 5 years. But you can certainly renew it fairly easy by leaving the country and coming back 1 week before the expiration of the visa, and then you get a 2-year stamp. That's a way to extend it a little bit. Now, when you're applying for the E2, there are lots of different variations from consulate to consulate. So make sure your attorney checks the uh, consulate and determines what are the particular requirements. This brings up a funny issue. A lot of times I'll get clients that'll, they'll be in whatever country and they'll say, well, I'm going to be, starting my business in Atlanta. Is it okay that you're in California? And I tell them, I go, look, it doesn't matter where the attorney is. The petition is going to the U.S. consulate where you live, and they need to know what they're doing, and it needs to be properly prepared. So it's irrelevant that I happen to be in California and your business is going to be in Atlanta. Okay, so just for your info. Now, for normal businesses, you need to look at the fair market value of the business to determine if it's normal. That's how they determine if there's been a sufficient investment. So, of course, if you apply for a business in California versus the exact same type business in West Virginia, it will obviously be much less in West Virginia, and the fair market value will not need to be as high. So take that into consideration. When you're doing the business plan, make sure you highlight the growth and profit potential over the next 5 years, because they want to know that this business isn't going to be marginal, that it's going to make essentially a lot more money than just, paying the bills. Okay. Uh, Now, a lot of times, people who don't have years and years experience managing businesses want to do an E2, and that's fine. But if you go in the interview and you have zero experience and you say, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do. I'm just, my parents bequeathed me $1 million and I'm going to go have some fun there. You won't get the E2. You do have to show that you have at least the savvy to be able to run a business and to be able to manage the business in order to get the E2. Of course, you can look at franchises as well, buying a franchise for an E2, because Consulate love franchises. The business operations already going. They already have a business plan. They already have a model. It all looks good. So that's a interesting item that you should look at if you're not sure where to invest. Now, English generally is not an issue. But if the company requires English, then of course you have to show that you do maintain it. Now, one interesting issue is that the money that has been spent on a foreign company as investment may be able to be used to show investment in the US E2 company. That depends on the case. So give me a call. And independent contractors versus employees are perfectly fine for E2s. So, given all this, I've just given you a few tidbits. So, if you have questions, be sure to email, send me, go on Facebook, message me, whatever you want to do, and I'll see what I can do and to help you go forward. Okay, more in the coming videos.